The first noble truth of Buddhism states that an intrinsic part of life is suffering. Even when we successfully achieve our desires, happiness remains elusive, lasting only briefly in a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Our minds torment us through frequent rumination when problems go around and around in our heads without ever reaching a solution. If you're going through this, you are not alone. In fact, anxiety and sadness are overwhelmingly common in our society. There are good reasons for bad feelings, though there are better and worse ways to deal with these negative feelings. This video explores the origins of sadness and anxiety and provides strategies on how to deal with these negative emotions. Unhappiness arises when there is a gap between desire and reality, and modern media encourages social comparisons that only add to this problem. But it would be naive to solely blame this on social media.
We are the loneliest society there's ever been. There's a study that asks Americans, how many close friends do you have who you could turn to in a crisis? And when they started doing this years ago, the most common answer was 5. Today, the most common answer, not the average, but the most common answer is none.
Loneliness may be the biggest culprit of unhappiness, and it has very deep roots in our biology. See, our brains were forged in a different environment. A hunter-gatherer society, where loneliness was a matter of life and death because our survival strongly depended on the protection of our larger group. So humans who avoided being separated from others, those who strongly felt loneliness when isolated, were more likely to survive and pass on their loneliness-fearing genes to future generations. On to you and I. And though we no longer face the threats of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we strongly feel their emotions. We feel anxiety and sadness because they are useful, just like pain and hunger can be useful. Loneliness is not the only cause of mental suffering. Other problems in life can take us down the same path. Heartbreak, death of a loved one, loss of a job, a serious health diagnosis. The list of life events that can leave us in mental misery is endless.
We're always at war. I mean, we're always fighting something. There's always this you're always noticing something wrong. You're feeling uncomfortable in your body. You're reacting to something that somebody did or you thought they did. You're navigating a social encounter that seems off kilter. It's awkward and you're trying to figure out what to say, and that sounded stupid, and you're just being blown around.
In addition to our life situation, our personal characteristics can also make us vulnerable to sadness. And these characteristics are influenced both by our prior experiences and our innate biology, nature versus nurture. A rough childhood filled with neglect and abuse can scar people for life. But also, mood disorders can be inherited and are known to have a basis in genetics. So we have life problems, loneliness, which is a type of life problem, and personal characteristics as the main causes of sadness and anxiety. So what can we do about them? Now, each person's situation is unique, and what works differs per individual, but there are 3 powerful strategies that we can leverage to deal with these negative emotions. The first is cognitive reframing. Every year, thousands suffer from a stroke of the brainstem and develop locked-in syndrome, which results in complete paralysis. Patients of this condition lose all voluntary movement apart from the ability to blink. And billions live in countries with extreme poverty, living on dirt floors, working in the hot sun to make $2 to $3 a day, with no toilets or indoor plumbing. This is life for a good percentage of the world. Cognitive reframing is learning to see things from a different perspective. Remembering how good we have it makes us appreciate the people, situations, and things in our lives. The next concept is to view responsibility as a source of meaning and purpose.
All of us have it very hard at some times in our lives. It's like, well, what's the alternative? You take responsibility for that and try to struggle uphill because the alternative makes everything worse. It's not like it's fair. I know perfectly well that people have brutal lives. I've been a psychotherapist for 20 years. I've seen things you can't imagine.
As Nietzsche says, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. This might be one of the most fundamental ideas on the purpose of life. This concept is perfectly illustrated by Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist who lived through the Holocaust and labored in several concentration camps, which he documented in his seminal memoir, Man's Search for Meaning. He found that in the face of the most difficult hardships in the Nazi concentration camps, it was those who found meaning through service to others that were best able to deal with the most difficult hardships of life. There are countless problems to solve in the world, and everyone has a role to play in improving the human experience and reducing the suffering of the masses. Having a sense of purpose and duty can empower us to live bravely despite the hardships of life.
What happens is if I talk about responsibilities, everyone is silent, just like they are now. Silent and not moving, right? Focusing, attentive. Say, pick up your responsibility. Pick up the heaviest thing you can and carry it. And the room goes quiet and everybody's eyes open. And I think, that always makes me break up.
The final concept is to forge trust in relationships. Although they can be scary, experiencing a trust in relationship and acceptance from someone who cares about us is deeply therapeutic. These bonds can give us the courage to change our self-protective and self-defeating ways and can open up new life paths and opportunities. For those who are mentally stuck, it can also serve as a positive mental reset by providing a new vision of who you are and what the future relationships can be. It can be hard to find this, but we don't need that many. Learning to be vulnerable and owning our flaws, while trying our best to intently listen when others speak, which I've made a video on, is a great way to welcome authentic relationships into our lives. Over 2 years ago, I made my first video on reducing anxiety and overthinking. I initially went down this path to deal with the troubles that I personally felt, and I'm still going through, but then I quickly learned of how pervasive of a problem this is. Almost everyone feels anxious and occasionally depressed. That video has been seen by almost 100,000 people, with roughly 300 comments of individuals like you and I searching for help and connection. There's a clear hunger for information on these topics, and I hope that this video is a contribution to this movement. It appears that loneliness, negative life events, and psychological problems are the major causes of anxiety and sadness, and that suffering has its origin in desire. But cognitive reframing, forging trust in relationships, and viewing responsibility as a source of meaning and purpose are some of the most effective ways to deal with our negative emotions. Thanks for watching.